Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this important hearing. Mr. Goffman, this EPA just cannot help themselves. It's one thing after another, attacking Americans' way of life in pursuit of some pointless agenda that actually benefits no one. And I mean no one, and we're going to go through the numbers and I'll explain why. Because we always got to tackle policy this way. What are the costs? What are the benefits? Policy is about trade-offs. By EPA's admission, this tailpipe emissions rule is designed to increase EV sales. Is that correct?
It's designed to improve air quality.
Okay, so the EPA website states the proposed standards are also projected to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. This is just from the website. I don't know, maybe you guys are on a different page. Depending on the compliance pathways manufacturers select to meet the standards, EPA projects that EVs could account for 67% of new light-duty vehicles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so right now, EVs account for 1% of cars registered to U.S. drivers and about 4.5% of new vehicle sales. So that's quite a leap. Here's another thing. EVs are expensive, on average $20,000 more than a similarly sized internal combustion engine vehicle. Here's another thing. The price of a new EV has risen by over 50% in the last 10 years, despite a concurrent increase in sales and obvious scalability. So what evidence does the EPA have that EVs will become more affordable for American consumers, or is that even part of your consideration?
Affordability is a major part of our consideration. And we're fortunate as we do this, as we put this proposal out and consider finalizing it, to have a number of factors.
Okay, so they've increased by 50%. How are they going to start decreasing? How is that going to happen? Does the EPA even care? How do you analyze that?
Well, one of the things we're doing is, and one of the things we observed even before we put the proposal out, is that a number of American manufacturers committed to the goal by 2030 of marketing 50% of their new car fleet as EVs. And at least one American company has followed that up by
none of that speaks to costs. You guys have no idea, do you? And you don't take it into account. EVs are more expensive. This is just a fact. It's the way they're built. It's the way they're processed. So the question is, they're going to be more costly, continuously more costly, as they always will be. So the question is, what benefit do we get from that? Are we saving people's lives by making them spend more on cars? No. You know, does the EPA, when you assess, you know, the benefits from emissions from EV vehicles, do you assess the life cycle emissions? Do you take those into account from production of everything that goes into it through the sale?
We do look at that.
Okay.
Under the Clean Air Act Authority, we look primarily and base our standards on.
Yeah. I mean, I know you guys don't. You don't have any reports that do that, but luckily others do. International Energy Agency did a critical minerals report. They found that when you count all emissions of production, on average, a single battery for an EV, you have to dig up 500,000 pounds of earth. That involves heavy machinery, oil, gas, and let's not forget, 85% of critical mineral processing is in China. I'm pretty sure their environmental standards are not very high. According to other studies by the manufacturers themselves, like Volvo, like Volkswagen, manufacturing an EV generates 70% more emissions than manufacturing an internal combustion engine. You need to drive 70,000 miles to even break even with an internal combustion engine. Even at 100,000 miles, you're only getting a 20 to 30% reduction in carbon emissions. So it'll do nothing for climate change. It'll do nothing to reduce overall global emissions. And by the way, the EV owner already drives less, so it's unlikely that most of them have even reached the break-even point. So just by the math in the short term, EVs increase emissions globally. That's just the math. Now, if you're concerned about air pollution, which is, you've stated that, on the EPA website it says this: the graph below shows that between 1980 and 2022, gross domestic product increased almost 200%. Vehicle miles traveled increased over 100%. Energy consumption increased 29%, and the US population grew by 47%, but during that same time period, total emissions of the 6 principal air pollutants dropped by 73%. It's like we're making all this progress. So I just want to know, where's the evidence that we are all of a sudden in an air quality crisis in America and that we need to impose these enormous costs on the American people? Where's the evidence for that?
I believe there's extensive evidence, and as it happens, it's reflected in a proposal we issued addressing
There's
ambient air quality.
extensive evidence that we've decreased our problems with air quality, that we've increased air quality in America. There's extensive evidence on your own website, it took me 5 seconds to Google it, that those pollutants have decreased by 73%. That's what your evidence says. And you want to impose these massive costs on the American people. That's why these bills are up for consideration today. And I yield back.
Gentlemen.